Welcome to the Troy Stoeber Show. You don't have to listen, but you're going to hear about it anyway.
You don't have to listen, but you're going to hear about it anyway. This is the Troy Stoeber Show, and I'm your host, Troy Stoeber. We have a very special guest in the studio today. Her name is Genviev and Clair. And Genviev, get us started. I want to know a little bit about you, but I would describe you as sort of a Renaissance woman because you dabble in lots of different areas. And I know your focus is hypnosis. Maybe you can start by just giving us a little background about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, it all started because I had no other choice but to learn at a very early age how to use my brain in a different manner, how to use my brain to survive extraordinary adversity, to survive the unsurvivable. My skull was fractured. I had multiple severe traumatic brain injuries at a very early age, 4 years old and on. And so I stumbled time and again through the course of my early childhood upon the phenomenon known as peritraumatic dissociation, which is actually when you're faced with extraordinary harm and you have ran out of options to protect yourself. Basically, your mind will split from your body and you enter the realm of the subconscious mind where you no longer feel any physical pain, no matter what's happening to your body, and you no longer feel any emotions either. So you're looking at whatever is happening from a place of absolute peace. And that is frankly extraordinary to experience. I don't wish it upon anyone because it means that you're literally in the realms between life and death. But when you crossed into that realm of the subconscious mind where you're watching the scene free of any forms of emotions in an absolute radical acceptance and non-judgmental way, and you're completely peaceful, you're entering the realm of the absolute incredible capacities of that force of life that is within you to rise above adversity. So basically, my specialization is to help people resurrect from the obliteration of adversity, from the ashes of adversity that leaves you completely destroyed, rise again and rebuild a life, the quality of which will far surpass anything you've known in the past. So that was my very beginning start, if you will, in how I became fascinated by that realm of the mind that is above and beyond what we're taught initially. And so from a very early age, with harsh conditions, obviously, I read a lot because that's what I had access to. So I started reading about the brain and the mind and how to access that place of extraordinary potential. Mm-hmm. And so I never stopped studying. So by the time I was 15 years old, I was already hypnotizing classmates, helping them learn how to overcome blocks and obstacles. My focus was always therapeutic. It was never the tricks. It was always how do we help ourselves when we have issues and problems and obstacles and blocks. And then by the time I was 17, I graduated from the Silva Institute of Psychoorientology in Paris. So that's the famous mind control Silva organization that is really the basis of hypnosis. And then I followed a regular university cursus at the Sorbonne University in Paris, where I did an MBA and doctorate level, DESS it's called in my country, Diplôme d'études supérieures spécialisées, which is delivered by the Department of Doctorates of the Sorbonne, and in international communications, foreign languages, international affairs. So I have like a business background. And then I went into medicine in the United States with trauma, emergency medicines in wilderness environments. So I served as a professional ski patrol on Mount Hood, and I'm trained as a deep sea rescue diver. So I have got the medical aspect as well.
I was not kidding when I said a true Renaissance woman. I mean, if you're following this, that's business, medicine.
Brain plasticity,
neuroplasticity. It's extraordinary, Genviev. And the thing is, like, each one of those experiences helped you in a certain way, helped you grow, helped you hone your craft. And we haven't even got up to present day because I know that you have a practice, right? And in fact, I think there's even an entire YouTube channel dedicated to the power of the mind. So you can tell us about that. We can go anywhere with today's podcast. I'm very excited to have you here, by the way.
I'm so happy to be here too as well. And yes, so I have a practice in Oregon. In fact, when I landed in Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, breathtaking beauty, natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest, the Pacific Northwest adopted me. And so, and I found here in Oregon, there is this magnificent collaborated care approach. So I was very surprised to find this absolutely magnificent exchange and collaboration with the medical field. I work extremely closely with physicians, psychiatrists, medical doctors, chiropractors, nurse practitioners, on the conditions of their patients. Basically, when members of the medical field send me their patients, it's because no other approach has been successful. So I am sent the complex cases that are typically resistant
You're the
to
backstop.
treatment.
You're the backstop.
I'm the last option.
But in many cases, it's very effective. And tell me about the power of being able to go back and correct the effects of trauma. Because, like you said, this radical acceptance from a non-judgmental place. I mean, to me, that's extremely powerful to change or to affect a change upon your life.
Absolutely.
There was a doctor who I'm familiar with, Nadine Burke-Harris, who talks about the power of trauma and the impact that traumatic childhood experiences have on you. So if you can go back and from a safe vantage point, observe, analyze, and correct things, what possibilities exist? So
Yes, it's a magnificent field, and I love that you just mentioned Nadine Burke. She took over the research study that was developed in ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study, that demonstrated that adverse experiences happening to us at an early age change the architecture of the brain and typically lead to life-lasting results in our health over the course of a lifetime. It's an impactful, deeply impactful study. And I've researched it. I've spoken about her work and the work of the doctors of Kaiser Permanente and the CDC, who initially started that study in the mid-90s. I spoke about that on my YouTube channel extensively. So basically, what I do is I help people forensically go back to the causes for the issues they're struggling with today. So we don't just go back to investigate for
random
no
things.
reason. Exactly. Some people tell me, I'd like to know what happened when I was 2. I said, no, tell me what problem you have today. And we let the mind, from the problem that we're struggling with, whether it's fear, whether it's stress, whether it's lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem, lack of self-worth, because when we're emerging from early life traumatic experience, our self-worth is shattered. We have fractures in our internal sense of self. And how can you lead, not to mention successful, but a quality life if you have a fractured self fabric, right? So that's the core. That's the first thing we address. And when we go back in time, it's absolutely extraordinary. Quantum physics tells us that time and space are illusions, that is our brain translating, and that, time can be folded. And really that's what we do when we take a current issue, like a conviction that I am not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm faulty, why am I this way, I should have been that way. These are false beliefs. These are false beliefs that were placated onto us, stuck like labels onto us by others around us who didn't have any other ways to, didn't know any better, didn't have any other ways to help us discover our truth.
The dissociation is a very functional thing. I mean, it helps us. It's really a survival technique.
Absolutely, coping.
And so, at first, that's what you need when you're a young person. That you're just trying to get by. When you get into adulthood, it's time to kind of consolidate and center yourself a little bit. And now the neuroplasticity comes into play, because what once was something that worked very well for us and helped us survive now is just detrimental to our creativity, to our leadership, to our ability to communicate, all the things that normally adults need.
Absolutely. Yes, and that's a good point, because when we experience peritraumatic dissociation on the spot, on the moment, as you said, it's a life-saving mechanism in the way that means that your body and emotions are experiencing a level of harm and distress, physical pain, that you wouldn't be able to process. So your mind splits out. So it's magnificent on the moment. It's extraordinary. But if you experience it repetitively, especially, it becomes a habit, and then you start to dissociate at moments, especially in adult life, where you shouldn't dissociate, because you need to be engaged and involved in your physical body in order to defend yourself, in order to interact. And when you start to dissociate repetitively, it becomes a critically damaging behavior.
And it becomes sort of a second nature, sort of unconscious default pattern, because the more you do it, the quicker and easier it becomes a problem. So I think there are actually some adults who just really don't even know, they don't really know any other way. They just kind of always assume that their thought patterns and their reactivity and their approaches were always healthy, but in fact, they may not be.
Right, and actually you're talking about something that's really interesting too, is when we have a wound, even without talking about peritraumatic dissociation, but when we are wounded, let's say at 4 years old or 6 or 12, we establish a response, knee-jerk reaction, that at that time was the only thing we could think of.
Yes.
And it worked to get the attention of mommy or daddy or whatnot at that moment in time. But then we grow up into adults, and when those wounds are not addressed, if somebody's poking into that wound unconsciously, because of course they don't know, you're going to react not based upon your emotional fabric and evolution of today. You're going to react upon the age of the original wound. And that's when you find yourself reacting with mechanisms that are not skillful and that actually
Very primitive.
damage you.
Very primitive. And they
immature. Immature ways of reacting.
I'm not going to say who here might be very immature at heart, but that was a learned response. So,
Well, and we all carry, nobody, of course, there's no such thing as perfection. As we go through the course of our journey, we get chipped and wounded and pushed around. And so we develop these responses. And so now we're going into physics.
I call them kind of potentiations. Like the more it happens, the more the brain sort of facilitates it. I think you used the analogy of like snow and skis, kind of like making deeper grooves.
It is actually Newton's law of motion. Newton's first law of motion: an object in motion tends to stay in motion. It's basically physics. The more we do something, the more fluent we become at doing this thing, the more we're establishing a neural pathway in our brain. And so it's like a groove in the sand or in the snow. If you're taking a wheel or a ski or any moving object and you're starting to do a groove, so at the beginning you're forcing your way through the terrain, but the more you do it, the smoother it becomes and the deeper it becomes. And now the more difficult it is to get out of that groove and start doing another groove. And that's where I step in.
Are you saying that old habits die slowly? Is that what you're saying? Is that why it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks because they're just used to?
It's not hard, but it's just you have to find the right knowledge to do that, to change the groove. So it's actually easy, but you have to know how to do it, which nobody teaches us, until we find ourselves face against the wall and nothing else has worked, and that's when people come to this work.
I am familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, and some of the therapists that they try to sort of fake it till you make it. So they'll take you out of your groove and help you kind of see things from a different perspective, or challenge you, or do that initial kind of uncomfortable work. But if you fake it till you make it, what you're doing is you're starting the tedious, slow, repetitive process of making new healthy grooves, which is what your goal is with hypnosis, correct?
Right. And there's a difference also, because when you're working with traditional talk therapy, whether it's CBT, DBT, traditional psychotherapy, you're basically working with the conscious part of the mind. And that's the tip of the iceberg of the force within. It's the thinking, planning, plotting part of the mind, the conscious part of the mind. And you can actually understand something deeply, very well, understand every aspect of it and know where it comes from and why you're responding this way and how you would want to respond, and still not be able to feel differently, because feeling part of the mind is the subconscious part of the mind. So when we work with hypnosis, we're actually bypassing the conscious part of the mind, going back to the deep sea diving idea. I love that metaphor of the iceberg, because as a deep sea diver, I'm in my element under the surface in water. So when we work with hypnosis, we're diving below the conscious level of the mind, and we're going to the emotional fabric, the feeling part of the mind. And when we're able to reverse the direction, that massive force, your subconscious mind is regulating your heartbeat, is regulating your circulation, it's regulating your cell regeneration, your breathing, all of it absolutely effortlessly. Imagine how powerful it is. While your conscious mind can only do one thing at a time when you're implementing effort. So the force of your subconscious mind is what we work with when we work with hypnosis. We're going down below the conscious level to address the feeling fabric of your life forces within your body. And that's why we have such rapid results.
It's amazing. Well, and I've heard you talk about it before as just like a rapid release of the things that had held you back previously. And suddenly, it's not even just a little trickle. It's just like one thing leads to another, and then just, it just really opens up your world to all the improvements that can be made. Is that I think I've heard you say that before. Going back to the therapeutic effects of hypnosis, you also had a career in the legal aspect of forensic hypnosis. So can you describe for my viewers what it was like to work with eyewitnesses or people who are testifying in court?
Yeah, actually, it's still ongoing. I mean, I still work with forensic hypnosis. So what forensic hypnosis is the application of hypnosis in civil and criminal investigations to enhance the recall of pertinent, important details among victims and witnesses, which may not recall those details initially.
Okay.
So in the same manner as in the clinical world, when I get approached by a case, it's usually a cold case. It's usually cases that have found no resolution.
Once again, you're the last resort.
After everybody's tried everything else, nobody thinks of me at first hand. They have to try everything else in the world, and when nothing else has worked, that's when they come to me. Basically. And so with it's fascinating with forensic hypnosis. Basically, what we do is we bring the person in the state of hypnosis. So scientifically, why do we have such extraordinary results in the recall in a state of hypnosis that we don't have otherwise? And electroencephalograms of the brain in hypnosis give us that answer. When you enter that state, you're actually igniting chemical and hormonal changes in the brain that correspond, interestingly, to what anti-anxiety, antidepressant prescription medications were engineered to produce chemically in the brain.
Okay.
We actually produce naturally at that level of the mind. So in plain terms, it means we're opening the floodgates and we're flushing out the highly inflammatory stress hormone known as adrenaline, cortisol. And we've all noticed the more stressed we are, the less clear thinking we are, and the more we can't remember.
We've blown our top.
So in that state, the first thing that happens is we're flushing out all of the stress hormones. And as they're flushed out, like you imagine the toilet, you press the flushing mechanism, that blue water comes in and takes everything out of the bowl. Well, so we're flushing out all the inflammation, all the stress levels. And then when that happens, it's replaced, our chemical and hormonal balance there is replaced by a boost in endorphins, dopamine, norepinephrine. So all of these high, good-feeling hormones or a natural opiate system in our body. So immediately our clarity of mind enhances.
Wow.
Memory is supercharged. So that's on the physiological manner. So what happens then is, as somebody enters that beautifully therapeutic state, which, by the way, boosts your immune system because the mind steps out of the way, your body returns to doing what it was naturally engineered to do, is repair, replenish, restore, revivify. So the person starts feeling very good, and then we go back in time to the scene of the crime in a forensic investigation. Who did what happened who the perps are. And for us, because it's usually me and the lead investigators or the lead defense attorney or whoever is in charge of the investigation, we are basically spectators of the events unfolding around us in the voice of our witness or victim with crystal clarity. And you relive everything, the sounds, the sights, the temperature of the air, the sensation, the emotion. So it's like a 3D animated motion picture that's playing holographically all around us. It's
Excellent.
absolutely fascinating.
And powerful. And like I said, I mean, it's a shame that we have to wait until the last minute to harness the full power of the mind, because that just seems like such a, like you said, a powerful therapeutic thing, a powerful investigative thing. Well, that's great.
According to Senior Special Agent John Kilnap of the ATF, Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco, hypnosis may well be the only way to recall those important details that victims and witnesses have blocked out of their minds for trauma. So it's recognized. And even if it's some cases, courts are debating the admissibility of forensically elicited evidence and information. But what I say to people coming to me is, don't take this as an evidence. Take this as an investigation. And then
it could give you clues,
Exactly.
like leads to kind of that you never really had thought about before.
Exactly. And then the investigative team can go after these details in a court-admissible manner.
Okay, so I feel like more people should be harnessing the power of the brain and the power of hypnosis. And so I think I've asked you this before, like, why hasn't hypnosis caught on? Like, why isn't it more mainstream and widespread, and why aren't people learning about hypnosis and practicing it more?
It's been done from the beginning of mankind. We have drawings and hieroglyphs on ancient Egyptian temples of what back then they called sleep temples, basically. And the priest, the high priest, you see them with their hand extended and some energy coming out of their hands, and then you see people coming. So even back at the beginning of mankind, we were using this. I think there's been some, evolution of certain things like fictionalization and the media and fictionalization, especially back in the old days, that gave very erroneous, very incorrect image of hypnosis. So most people are afraid of hypnosis. They think that when you are going into hypnosis, you're going to relegate the power of your mind to the person
what a misconception.
doing the hypnosis.
A complete misconception.
When in fact what happens is you're regaining more of the control of your mind. I have so many fun stories through the course of my practice here in Oregon, but one woman was sent to me by her psychiatrist, and she called me and said, "Genviev, my doctor told me I needed to come see you, so I have to obey my doctor. But I'm going to tell you I'm terrified because, my husband and I," she says, "have been soulmates since our childhood. If you hypnotize me and you change my mind, am I going to lose my husband because I won't be the same person? He won't love me anymore?" I mean, that gives us an idea of the misconceptions about hypnosis. My response to her was, well, let me ask you something. So you've got terrible anxiety and depression. If you were awakening in the morning without these conditions, if you were to feel happy and joyful and calm and loving your life, would your husband love you less? And she says, "No, of course not." And I said, "Well, there's your answer."
You have everything to gain and not anything to lose. I just feel like there's a powerful self-improvement angle to what hypnosis can do for you. If our viewers had questions about how to get a hold of you or some of your online products and stuff, maybe you could give us a little pitch about that.
Yes, absolutely. So the first way to work with me is, if you'd like to have the most powerful, the most personalized approach, is to work with me one-on-one. And so you can do so by contacting me through my website. That's GenvievHypnosis.com. And you can contact me directly there. all work these days is remote. So I work with you, with anybody who is interested, from the safety and security of your own home, on camera, on Zoom, Skype, whatever modality is best for you. So that's one-on-one. And then I have a very large library of educational content. There's audio sessions that you can download with my voice, and it's studio recording with full sound effects, and it's just magnificent. So that you can own it. Actually, here is one of my audios right here. I don't know if you can see it well, but you can download this. Today we don't do the CDs since nobody has CD players anymore.
Just do it electronically.
But exactly, you can download this. I have books. I'm actually releasing this month a brand new book. It's my first time release of my signature approach. I'm so excited. We're finishing it right now with the jacket and everything. That teaches you how to do what I do yourself. I'm really big on empowerment. And even when I work with people one-on-one, I teach from the first consultation. I teach everybody how to understand how to work with your mind, how to do what I do yourself, so you become rapidly empowered. So that's one-on-one, and then product. And then, of course, we have a library of educational content on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Genviev TV. It's a partner, YouTube official partner channel since 2020. I was so excited to be nominated as an official YouTube partner.
YouTube is so accessible, and it's easy to get your name out, and you can have such a widespread positive effect on people's lives. That's amazing. Wow.
And that's accessible, obviously, 24/7. So you don't need to be able to reach me. So youtube.com/Genviev TV, you have the library of contents, including some sessions there that you can do. And then on Instagram, I have released a number of what I call lightning fast brain rewiring loops. They're a few seconds long, and they play in loop over and over until you decide you click out of them. And I love that because you can play them over your own music if you're running or doing chores. And so you have one for relaxation, you have one for empowerment, you have one for radical acceptance, which helps us deal with things.
Excellent.
And then there is events. Also, I'm on tour this year, so we're doing public events. There's the career, which we were talking about earlier on.
Becoming a hypnotist.
Exactly. For those of you who decide that you'd like to take it even further, and either just for your own knowledge or help your family and friends or become a professional, I'm a board-certified educator with the largest organization in the field of hypnosis in the world. So when you work with me, it's a 100-hour course, and we also do this at your own time, according to your own schedule. And so if you're interested in any of these aspects, you can email me at Genviev@genvievhypnosis.com, or you can text me also, sending your name, email address, and phone number to 503-887-8034.
We'll put that up on we'll put it up on the screen for all of our viewers. Oh, that's amazing. I have different segments. So I'll go into like the vocabulary segment and the art segment. And ladies and gentlemen, usually I have that all prepared. But on today's version of the Troy Stoeber Show, Genviev has come up with some vocabulary words and some artwork for us to enjoy. So you take it away.
Yes. So I thought we would do a different vocabulary section to bring more interest to the audience, different kind of perspective.
Excellent.
So we can start with Latin, one of the dead languages that fascinates me. I always love to put Latin in all of my books because it's magical. It contains its own power. And being a professional,
I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist, and that's the language of science. So
we have some vocabulary words in Latin.
Okay.
So first of all, who is familiar with the word apricus?
Apricus. Latin word apricus.
Which has a lovely meaning of saying full of sunshine.
Full of sunshine.
Apricus, to bask in the sunshine. And then we have the opposite, crépusculum. Crépusculum, which in English you say twilight. In French we say le crépuscule. So you notice how close it is from the Latin.
But you pronounce that so amazingly, crépusculum.
That's my French coming through.
I love that. And twilight is such a beautiful time of day too. So I
know, it's that magic in between the
especially in Portland, especially this time of year. It's like just beautiful lighting. The rest of the day it's just harsh and shadows, but at twilight it's quite beautiful. I like that. So
And then we have pour les siècles des siècles in French, which in Latin comes to per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Excellent. For the ages and ages and ages, which means for all of eternity,
Timeless?
basically. Yes. The essence of timelessness of the Latin language itself. And then we have manus in mano, which is translated by hand in
hand in hand.
Manus in mano. And another one, which is inspiring, amor vincit omnia.
Amor vincit omnia.
Love conquers all.
Okay, well, you got an A for your vocabulary because this is all very inspirational. And the thing is, I'm definitely going to have to repeat these.
Per
because
omnia saecula saeculorum.
We're gonna make grooves, and eventually this is gonna be part of my everyday.
Love it. You know, I even brought like a little. You know, here's a good quote. Dulcius ex asperis.
Dulcius ex aspiris.
Excellent. Which means adversity makes victory all the sweeter, or sweeter after difficulties. Dulcius ex asperis.
Genviev is not short on inspiration. I mean, it's just one big smile ever since you walked into the podcast room. So, this is
Thank you. Verba volant scripte manent. Les paroles s'envolent in French. Les paroles s'envolent, les écrits restent. Verba volant scripta manent. Which means, you know, whatever you say out loud just flies away. But when you put things in writing, you're transferring a legacy that remains.
Is this
for
what
the
inspired you
generation.
to write your first book?
Well, you know, I've been a reader in childhood because, you know, that's what I had access to. And I was told I started writing before I even knew how to write. So I would just fill out pages and pages and pages of letters before I knew how to write. I was compelled to just write. And then I've written poetry anthology, Emotions, many decades ago. and I've co-authored the Chicken Soup for the Soul book, which I'm going to be signing at the upcoming event. Chicken Soup to inspire the body and soul. Motivation and inspiration for, living a life of quality.
One of these days, Troy Stoeber is going to make a book. And it might be like a children's book or something.
Oh,
but,
I love that.
You know,
That's good.
That's about my...
I love it.
That's my power, brain power.
I love it. It's really important.
What's interesting is all the things we learn that we don't necessarily know we're learning, and all the ways in which that affects us that we don't always know how it's affecting us.
Course.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, for sure.
You just kind of assume when you're a child that that's normal. The experience that you have is just what everybody has. So
yeah, biology of beliefs, you know, and then a belief becomes a conviction, and then it changes the way you act and react and the way you experience the world around you. So absolutely.
So you can do what most people do, which is very carefully and methodically and with great effort and mighty strength try to pull those filters off one at a time. Or you can talk to Genviev St. Clair and you can just take a little shortcut back around the wall and get back into the what's behind
and open up the
behind the curtain.
And they finally discover life worth living, because it's the most important thing is being able to appreciate quality of life. And when you release all of the blocks and limitations, the pain, the sorrow, the
Some
grief.
people don't even know what they're missing.
Exactly. That's when you discover.
What's the artwork?
So
artwork.
I
like this one. Okay, I saw this one.
we have. Look at this, from the Tao Te Ching.
This will be coming up on your screen, ladies and
Lao
gentlemen.
Tzu.
That's beautiful.
Anticipate the difficult by managing the easy. So, one of the ways that is so obvious that we can do this, I teach people how to resurrect from extremely damaging circumstances and events and damaging relationships. And when you use education to recognize the signs, the red flags, the pattern, you can avoid all of the trauma by recognizing before you plunge into it what you're facing. So that's one of the clear examples of managing avoiding the difficult by managing the very easy. Seeing the red flags, educating yourself, and then recognizing what it is, and not entering into it, which after you're immersed and literally swimming and sinking into it, it's going to be much more difficult.
Once those grooves are really, really deep, it's hard to get a different perspective. It's hard to see kind of where you are. You just, it sort of becomes part of who you are. And that's what I was just saying before. I mean, some people don't understand even how things that happened to them a long time ago, traumatic things, are affecting them still today. So, if you can, I mean, to me, it's a daunting task when you see the enormity of the change that has to happen. But if you can manage the small things, eventually there's a little bit of momentum and a little cascade that happens, and then you start to realize, oh, you know what? Things that I always believed before aren't always true in the same way that I always believed them to be. So.
I know. And sometimes we have, and I can tell you from first experience too, we are seeing an enormity of a task. Like you said, it feels like a big monster. And we think, how can I possibly remove that? And sometimes it's a misperception. And once you work with it, you can release it in ways you never imagined possible. A lot of the time we see results after just one session. I mean, enormous results. So it doesn't have to be as difficult as we think it might be. Another, and that's from Lao Tzu, that beautiful wisdom.
Okay.
Another beautiful wisdom by Lao Tzu is, to the mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders. It's so powerful.
Okay, so that's, and I mean, one of the most fundamental misconceptions is that power is a very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yang energy, action-oriented energy.
Very sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Mm-hmm. It's very disorganized, or from a standpoint of.
You have to put an enormous effort. Yeah,
and
what you resist persists. So a lot of time, the harder the effort, the more the resistance, the lesser the result.
Okay.
And so when you think about water, for instance, the most absolutely non-resistant element in the planet, at the same time is the most powerful element in the planet. Think about that. You take it in your hands, it'll go through your fingers. You throw a boulder into it, it's not going to push it back like we would do.
Completely compliant.
No, it just absorbs it and goes around it. And it's absolute radical acceptance and non-judgmental quality. Water is capable of chiseling, making lace out of rock cliffs on the shores of Normandy and everywhere else. It's capable of extinguishing forest fires, drenching them so much that they cannot restart. In its absolute radical acceptance, non-judgmental quality, water is the most powerful element on the planet. And so how would it be to become like water? Imagine that for a moment. What would it feel like to become just as pure, clear, undisturbed, and flowing as water? See, that's the key to power.
I love the way, Genviev, you communicate, because using analogies just illustrates what you're trying to communicate so much more effectively. I here at the Troy Stoeber Show, a few people have seen me do my little brain model. Okay, so under all circumstances, the brainstem is kind of always functioning in the background and kind of keeping us, our heartbeat, our respiratory rate, everything's fine. The cerebral cortex, however, can be very disorganized at times, and I call this blowing your top. Okay, it is not powerful. This is not where you want to be. Okay, now when the prefrontal cortex is really ordered and you're calm, you're still, you're mindful, it's such a more powerful state. You have access to all your faculties, all your creativity, all your ingenuity, and it's just
problem-solving abilities. Yeah.
So I like to call this state DINBAR. We'll put a graphic up on that. DINBAR.
Last art.
Okay.
Surprise you with this one. I don't think I sent it to you. Since we're in America, this is Mitakuye Oyasin from the First Nations, from the Lakota Indians.
Lakota Indians.
Mitakuye Oyasin, which means we're all one. We're all related.
That's really
from
interesting.
From the mineral nation to the plant nation to the animal nation to the human nation to the spirit nation, all are relation, and even to the creator, the ultimate gift of life. Because inside our physical body, as you know, as we all know, we're not our physical body. Our physical body is constantly changing, constantly metamorphosing. And so we're not our body, we're not our brain either, which is the operating software that controls our body, right? We're not our personality. That's an act from the Latin persona. You know, the Latin.
It's all changing. There's neurons in there that are changing all the time.
So if we're not our body, we're not our brain, we're not our personality, what are we? We're life. We're an energy of life.
We're all one.
We're all one.
Mitakuye Oyasin.
Oyasin.
A little trivia. I am from the land of the Lakota Sioux. So I grew up in Siouxland.
Nice.
Northwest Iowa and South Dakota are the places where the Lakota Sioux originally roamed. And so I come from Siouxland.
Yay, love it. So much magic. You know, I did Lakota Sweat Lodge in the middle of Texas.
That's relaxing.
With Lakota Indians. That was tough. I wouldn't call that relaxing. It was brutally intense. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I mean, they were all speaking in Lakota. They didn't even speak English. Here was this little French girl in there with all the Lakota people. Fascinating. I
got one final fun fact. This is going to be the dopamine dump. Okay, so this is we've all been very chill and very cool and calm and collected in Dinbar, right? Tell me about this is a fun fact that not everybody knows, but Genviev actually raced motorcycles, and so I don't know how your racing career was, but it sounds like you were really young and really fast. So tell me about how that worked.
How in the world you found that out about me? It really startled me. I was like, how does he know that? Where did he find that information?
Indeed.
So racing, it's not 100% accurate. What happened is I grew up in Monte Carlo on two wheels because, that's how you grow up on two wheels in Monaco. So at the time I was 14 years old, I had my 49.9 millimeters driver's license and was going around Monaco in moped. And then at 16, I got my 125 motorcycle license. And I was riding this magnificent chrome and black horsepower 125 DTLC Yamaha V-twin two-stroke kickstart. And just a dual-purpose bike that was so huge. At 16, I was this little thing. I didn't even touch the ground. So at the red light, you'd see my bike go until I put my foot on the ground, holding this massively heavy thing. And then at the green light, it was so torquey, I just barely rotated. I was on the back wheel, basically, flying forward. So that was my childhood. And then I got my motorcycle license as well. And in America, I managed the largest Aprilia race team in the U.S. in the Aprilia Cup Series, in the days of the Aprilia Cup Series. So we had 13 race bikes and 6 or 7 racers, depending on the events. We had the editor-in-chief of Sport Rider magazine racing for us in our pit, in our team. And I started writing the column in Sport Rider that I entitled The Zen of Riding, Mind, Body, and Bike. And so I was involved professionally in the motorcycle industry, but I wouldn't say I was a racer because, the racers we had were like 15-year-old Australian guys. I was already over the hill comparatively.
Just in case you didn't think the international appeal and the childhood trauma and the hypnosis and the Lakota Indians and she's also involved in motorsports, okay? So
and I was raised in the land of the 4 Formula One GP. You know what I mean? Monte Carlo Formula One is just such an experience.
Genevieve, this has been an experience. I mean, honestly, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the Troy Stoeber Show. It's a pleasure to have you here, and you're a wealth of knowledge. I've enjoyed my Latin. I've enjoyed my art for today.
Oh, last thing before we wrap, would you like to know some very fancy insults in French that are super
Yes.
illiterate?
Okay.
Of the most fanciest literature type.
If there's anything I really want to do, I want to insult
somebody
people
in
so
French
awesome that they don't even know they're being insulted.
In a magnificently literary manner. This is what I love about it. You remember Tintin? So in French, we call this Tintin et Milou. Tintin et Milou. You might remember it's from Hergé, which created this incredible series of Tintin et Milou. Let me give you an example of. So that's Capitaine Haddock. He's one of the. So he's a sailor, a captain of a boat, right? And he's one of the lead characters. That's Tintin and that's Milou. So in this series, he's actually insulting people. Captain Haddock, because he's a little bit heavy on the drinking, and he's very grumpy, and he insults people, but with extremely advanced literary fashion. So one of his insults, he's calling people anthropopithèques. So if somebody if somebody rubs you the wrong way, you can call him an anthropopithèque, and what it means is.
Well, anthropology is like the study of human behavior, right? Humans and...
is a intermediary primate between the monkey and the mankind, human. Anthropopithèque.
So, you talk about immature, primitive behavior.
Anthropopithèque, you call somebody an anthropopithèque. Anthropopithèque.
You're acting like a primitive monkey.
Ostrogoth. So,
Ostrogoth
is les Goths de l'Est. Les Goths sont un peuple germanique qui est établi sur le Danube à l'ordre de l'Empire romain. So that dates back from the Roman Empire. Les Goths were a Germanic population that invaded Italy and founded a kingdom in the Theodoric. So you can call them an Ostrogoth as well.
You literally just took over their culture. You just said,
Ostrogoth.
No mas.
So these are the kind of terms that Hergé included in this fabulous...
Is this what you practice so that you can insult people?
Exactly.
I mean, that means a lot to me.
Anthropopithèque. She called me an anthropopithèque.
Illustrating once again that Genviev empowers you in ways you never thought possible.
You said this show was going to change us, right?
Thank you so much, Genviev. Ladies and gentlemen, the Troy Stoeber Show has a very special visitor. And so today we are proud to present Jean Alexander. What is it again? Wyatt Alexander. Wyatt Alexander is the Shih Tzu dog of Genviev and Clair. And he's making his podcast debut. Look at that beautiful dog. He's been a very good boy during our podcast. So we actually would like to say thank you for coming along, providing us support. Your emotional support animal.
There we go.
You traveled clear to the East Coast to pick up Wyatt.
Can you imagine? They won't ship anymore. That's a new thing now. In the middle of a pandemic, too.
Okay.
Because I had my previous one was 14 years old. He's very excited today. And when I lost him, I just said that wasn't good. So these women on the East Coast told me, don't worry, we have one for you. And then I had to fly across the country all wrapped up during the pandemic to go get this little boy.
That's dedication.
Back to the West Coast.
So he's a 1-year-old, or how old is he?
He's going to be 1 year next Monday. 1-year-old next Monday. It's his birthday coming up on the 24th. So I'm taking him.
Happy birthday, Wyatt.